Trade is good for everyone, but there is no trade without payments, and there is no payments without a movement of data. The biggest thing we can do as an industry is to crack digital identity. It's the holy grail of payments. Nobody would set out to try to conquer Asia if they really understand how big and fragmented it is. When we start to talk about B2B, it's different size of the corporations, it's different corridors, cash rich, time poor, it's all the different things that impact how you would like to see your perfect payment. But here comes the challenge.
This week, we're joined by Camilla Bullock, the CEO of EPAA, the Emerging Payments Association Asia.
We are the peak body for the payments industry in APAC, and we bring the industry together around policy and advocacy. In general, we have that vision of improving lives everywhere through payments.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Money Travels presented by Visa. I'm Rich.
I'm Max. Camilla, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
For those who don't know what the EPAA is, maybe give a quick intro to them, but also like how you came to be there after kind of your background and how you end up kind of working for someone like the EPAA.
We are the peak body for the payments industry in APAC, and we bring the industry together around policy and advocacy. We work towards a level playing field. We have North Stars like interoperability and harmonization. And I think in general, we have that vision of improving lives everywhere through payments. So we have about 70 members now from across the value chain and across the region. We have some of the very well-known big organizations like Swift, JP Morgan, Standard Chartered, HSBC, so really big end of town. Then we have PayPal, we have Ant Group, we have the newer players like Tunes and Neum, but then also supporting services like, for example, Equinix, that host many of those paytechs in their data center for cross-connectivity, or AWS as a cloud provider. But here it's a lot of global names, but then we also have a lot of smaller ones like Flip, for example, in Indonesia doing cross-border payments, or Hyperface in India.
One of the things we wanted to focus on with our conversation with you was, Asia is a super fragmented region. So how do you go about approaching that? Because you said you've got 70 members, I'm guessing across 7 or 8 kind of sub-regions of Asia.
I think that almost ties into the question how I came about to do this, because I think if I knew back in 2018 what I know now, I'm not sure if I would have taken this job, because it's been more challenging than I expected. But on the other hand, joking aside, I absolutely love what I do. But how it came about, so it was Tony Craddock met my co-founder, John Ryan, at Money 2020 back in 2018. And he asked John then, like, how do I go about to set up the Emerging Payments Association in Australia? So I'm based in Australia. And John replied back that there's no need for a payments association in Australia because we already have a strong body, so AusPayNet. But there is a need in the region because the region is fragmented, both of technology and culture and countries, just what you alluded to there. But I think setting up then, and what I found is that it's so fragmented in so many different ways, and also where the region are in the evolution of payments. Australia and Hong Kong and Singapore, for example, has gone more a traditional way like Europe, while if we're looking at emerging markets, like for example Indonesia and Philippines, they still are evolving their digital payments. They dig a big loop, a big jump, which I think we'll talk about during this show, like jumping over the cards. But then you also have 2 of the most leading innovation markets in the world in payments, and alluding there to India and Thailand also is leading in real-time payments uptake.
You come from, I'm not going to say a very different background. When we look at your career and what you've done so far, coming out from Sweden, going to Australia, running consultancy firm, and now jumping into this world, I almost want to ask, why? Why did you do that?
I think I'm very much a yes sayer. So if somebody has something that sounds exciting, I catch it and I run. But we had the opportunity to set up EPA in APAC, and John, who I referred to, my co-founder, thought it was a brilliant idea. I said, no, we just set up this consultancy, we just have a portfolio of clients, why would we do that? And he said, oh, if you don't want to do it, I'll still do it. And I was like, you can't go away and do something else when we have this organization together. So, okay, I do it 4 hours a week. And now, 6 years later or 7 years later, he left the organization and I do it 8 days a week, I would say. I shouldn't say. I think I might have one of the most interesting jobs in payments, because I get to sit in some of the most cutting edge discussion with some of the most innovative organizations. In the same time, we're trusted by regulators and central banks, and we get to be that voice for a full region. I mean, that is super exciting. And all the people we work with wants to work with us. They pay to work with us. So it is actually really exciting as such. But it's what you said about how I came with no background from payments, because I had nil background from payments. So I had a huge imposter syndrome in the beginning and used to say like, oh, I don't know anything about payments. Then I started to see all conversation always landing in digital identity, which I knew a little bit more about. And now I say like every discussion lands in data. And payments is the movement of data, and I do understand data. Of course, it's a lot more to payments technology than just moving data, but I think now, 7 years later, I overcome the imposter syndrome at least. I think I am where I'm supposed to be.
So do you think there is a bit of naivety from people, not from the payment space, but even people from the payment space coming into a market like Asia and just having their eyes, really pushed wide open saying, wow?
Absolutely. Nobody would set out to try to conquer Asia if they really understand how big and fragmented it is. And even being Swedish, coming to this region in the beginning, and not having spent time at all when I came out, I was in London 10 years before this, I sort of bundled Singapore and Hong Kong together. I mean, it's a massively different market. Or people think around Indonesia and Malaysia is the same. Again, massively different markets. So each market has its payments flavor, but also maturity flavor and regulatory frameworks, and also how you do business. What is said in a meeting and a roundtable compared to what's actually is happening is very different from market to market.
What does it mean for the end users? The small businesses. Why is fragmentation such a challenge when it comes to them essentially making a living?
We did this survey or research project together with PayPal, where we interviewed some SMEs across the region. And in general, an SME has to adhere to around, if you're starting to do cross-border payments in a larger scale, to around 100 different regulations per market. So that is a challenge by itself. We spoke to one gentleman in Singapore who was exporting digital medical services, and he said it was harder to get access to payments as a doctor than it was to actually get access to the licenses to deliver his services. Or we spoke to a lady in India selling saris, and she was active in, I think it was about 7 different markets across Southeast Asia. And she was still at this stage where she rather sent her salespeople to bring the cash home than creating connectivity and have access to cross-border payments. So there are still challenges there. And those were still fairly well-versed people as we did find them.
What the fragmentation does mean is a huge amounts of opportunity. And that certainly every guest we speak to in the region is just excited by the level of opportunity. But, you step off the plane, after the second time of asking, you agree to kind of set up the EPAA. Where do you start?
I think we started around the player that was leaning in. So like if I looked at our member, and we had a lot of global members actually that came to us early on. So PayPal, for example, was one of our funding members. And I think they had seen and understood how challenging the region is. So they wanted to have a home of payments, a common platform that the industry could come together to make sense of what's going on. It's about enhancing the industry and lifting all players, like just looking at cross-border payments, for example. We're not looking for each individual to grow their slice of the pie. We're looking for the pie to grow.
Where do you put the focus? Do you start with consumers? Do you start with government? Do you start with businesses, small, big? How do you prioritize all of this?
What we're saying is that we locate the challenge and opportunities where we add most value, where we have a unique voice. It's no point for us to lean into a discussion where there is already shaped consensus for the industry. So that was one of the leading stars we have. And then it's again where the members are active and where we can make a difference for them. And as well also where we are invited in as a special voice. One of our taglines, or whatever you call that, is that trade is good for everyone. That opens the door when we talk about trade. Trade leads to prosperity. But there is no trade without payments. And now, this year, I mean, who doesn't talk about trade? So I think we have a very unique position, first in the region, where we have this opportunity. So just look at Australia. We have election year, and we talk about trade and saying you need to put the payment system in the middle of this election campaign because we need that connectivity in the region. It shouldn't be easier to go far west than it should be to go to our neighbors. And specifically when we have some of the fastest growing GDPs in our region. So I think that is one of those discussions that we're very well suited for, because trade is another community by itself. If you look at it like free trade agreements and the WTO and the OECD discussions, different people sitting in those rooms than sitting in for example, the G20 cross-border payments discussion. They're talking about the same thing, but they're using different language, and everything is in the detail of what is actually the challenge or the bottleneck for an SME to do trade. They need the payments, or for a payments to move that data cross-border in a smooth and efficient and secured way.
I think the work that the EPAA are doing is really interesting because it sounds like there is, a really good collaboration between everybody in the ecosystem. It sounds like they're participating in the organisation to generally just make payments, trade, cross-border money movement better for everybody. And it's not a case of someone coming there to win market share. People have a genuine interest in making this better.
Absolutely. We talk about PPPs, the passionate payments people. So it's definitely about leaning in and how can we enhance this industry together. But I think we also have created a forum, a trusted forum for a dialogue, so people know when you come to our discussion, it is to do progress together. The members and the participants we invite into our room agree on 80%, but then it will always be that 20% that is a little bit like, oh, but we take on more risk, or you come on to commercial discussion, which we try to stay away from and just focus on that 80% that could drive the industry.
Yeah, of course.
One question I think is getting more and more important, especially if we put that SME in focus, is that who's in the room. I just came back from Money 2020, so a fantastic conference and really cutting edge discussion, but there is very few treasurers in there, very few SMEs, and it's that, or very few merchants. Some discussions need to actually have the person that's making the payments.
People don't necessarily think of it as a payment. It's part of a buying process, if you will, but so they don't have someone dedicated that really think that through. Or is it because we are guilty as an industry not to identify the right people and reach out to them to basically help them?
I think it's very hard if we look at corporate specifically, small or big. Rarely they have a payments person. So who do you talk to? Do you speak to the CFO? Do you speak to somebody looking after the customers, operations? So one question is that, do you have a payment strategy? Most people, they don't think about it. So for the payments industry to go and say, do you want to come and sit in our room, is the wrong question to ask. I'm still trying though to find, as soon as I go to a barbecue, I'm a PPP, I talk about payments, and I try to find in your organization who would like to come and talk about payments.
You're one of those people. A PPP, I really like that actually. It sounds like you really enjoy discussing with like-minded people how we actually climb this huge mountain. How successful have you been? What are some of the big wins you've had?
I think we really created that trusted regional voice for the industry and looking at bringing the industry together. Something we're very proud is that we have a seat on the 3 G20 task forces, the one around legal, regulatory and supervisory, and the PI for the infrastructure, as well as the API expert panel. And in those discussions, I think we've been very important in representing the region's voice and in tiny things like, it sounds tiny then, saying that we don't all use Latin languages in APAC, or we do not have the same address format in Japan as most of Europe has. So small of those things that gives the regional flavor into those global discussions, because I know when the G20 project was launched, so this was 2019, and we were invited, very, very lucky, because it shapes a lot of what we're doing, to a panel together with Tara Rees, who wrote one of those first reports out from FSB. And she said that in this paper, the private sector in APAC is underrepresented. And I know coming away from that and thinking like, oh, that's us. Okay, let's into this discussion with messaging that just we can deliver. So I'm very proud of having been a voice for the region in those discussions.
Why does it matter so much to you? Like, what is it that drives you?
I'm really proud when I can match up the conversation that makes something happen that wouldn't have happened if we wouldn't have paired those people together. So it might be two central banks talking on the sideline about something that moved the industry, or it might be a scale-up that have solved a problem that we can connect to an investor that's been looking for that. So it's actually the real value created around of bringing different people together. I love when I look at our roundtables discussion and I look like, oh my God, we had all those people together. They've never been together before, and they achieved this great discussion. It might not be that, oh, boom, there was a product created or a partnership, but they go away and they feel enriched by the discussion. And I like that. I like when I know that they will come back. When people say afterwards, oh, can we host the next discussion? So it's not so much about payments as connecting the people, I think.
Is it also about innovation? Because when we hear everything you said and you know, almost the recipe to be a PPP, it feels like innovation is innovation is part of it. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely have to be curious, and you have to know that you're never the smartest person in the room, because it is that everybody's holding a different piece. It's almost like having the lid of the puzzle box. And I know who's holding the puzzle pieces. And I even know who's holding the corner pieces, like the central bank, the regulator, the standard setting body. Just try to move those together. And I think the ultimate goal would be to get all the side edges together and then invite everybody with their puzzle pieces to build a beautiful picture.
Talk to us about kind of what you're doing to reduce the kind of the gender gap in thought leadership in this space, because you have a really interesting initiative. It's Meet Her, She Knows Payments.
I always say Meet Her, She Knows Payments is absolutely not about diversity. It's not a diversity project. It's all about optimal innovation. But for optimal innovation, you need to have diversity, and the biggest underrepresented group on those thought leadership tables are still women. Always happened like this. We hosted an event here in Sydney. So this gentleman pulled me aside and said, Camilla, why are there so few women involved in EPAA? And I had not seen it, because the problem was my network was 95% men. So I thought, like, I really need to figure out how to get to know the most brilliant women in the industry. And I thought that is around hosting the most cutting edge discussions. So every time we invite one amazing female leader to just talk about innovation in her space, and then another 11 amazing women. So it means I get to know 13 brilliant, awesome payments leaders that happens to be women. And it's just created a really good momentum and a good community. And we never lack women on our panels or a discussion.
As you said, it's not about diversity, but about cognitive diversity, effectively, and diversity of thought on not just the panels, but involved in the work that you guys are doing and kind of member participants.
We do the same actually when we look at the composite of, do we have enough small banks as big banks? Do we have the merchants? Do we have the people from those markets compared to this? So we never want to have, if we have a regional discussion, we can't just have people from Singapore. We're trying to find people from Korea and Vietnam and so on. So it's a little bit on the same way, like it's innovation, but it is so much energy in this project. I love it.
Fantastic. Well, listen, credit to the work that you've done there. It sounds brilliant. So we started talking about the fragmentation across Asia is like scary for people who don't know it, but also for people who live and breathe it. How have you seen that evolve over the last kind of 7 years, and how are you kind of tackling, even if it's just kind of knowledge around how to navigate that fragmentation?
I think for a lot of global players that we have in our membership, they got more connected to local players. So we do a lot of those connections behind the scene also. But I think to bring different policymakers together with a broader set of APAC payments player is something we achieved well. And also bringing the discussion like recently and related to the G20 target. So LEI, the Goliath Foundation, is part of our membership. And I think to bring that big discussion from the G20 down to like Fintech association level. So we work with 14 Fintech associations across the region, and that is our way of staying connected to the more startup scale-up players that has not been as well represented in our membership as global established. And that has been a really good way of us, like we do the big G20 discussion and make sure that they land also in smaller scale up in Indonesia and Philippines and India and so on and so forth. Another thing I'm very proud of is we just launched last week at the Money 2020 that's called India Connect. And I think this is one thing, not understanding a market, and this was us not understanding India. I thought we understood India. I mean, being based in this region, we followed the demonetization, the setup of the India stack, and also the newer layer of the open data layer or account aggregation. But then when I came to India 2 years ago for Global Fintech Festival the first time, it was mind-blowing. It was so much more than I could ever have imagined how the Indian ecosystem works together. They have the India stack that they build on, but then how they in partnership is reaching all the different pockets in the country, and as well as reaching all the different consumer groups. And us as the association going and seeing this and talking about it in other markets created this demand of understanding India. So we created this report just to try to translate what happened during the last, 9 years in India that has created this phenomenal factory of paytech, and also a phenomenal uptake on real-time payments. I mean, there's no other market that transacts so many real-time payments transactions a day.
And do you see everything that you discover in India? How do you see that, expanding to the region, or do you see that expanding to the region?
So I actually think that the Indian story is not fully understood outside of India. I think you hear the story being told about UPI, but it's heard differently. So it's sort of lacking in interpretation.
Yeah.
So I still think it's a lot of learning and partnerships that can be made. There are challenges again, because there's regulatory disalignment between markets globally and in our region. But then you also have the challenge, what are the preconditions there was in India compared to precondition in other markets? It's not that you can just lift and shift the blueprint, but you can learn from that blueprint and see what things can we borrow, what should we replicate, what could we enhance, and as well, how can we plug into some of the holes that still exist in the Indian market, because they still have so much evolution that will happen over the next 10 years.
Yeah, it's really understanding the leapfrog, right? Going over one technology to go straight to the next one. But sometimes it's easier to do when you don't have the legacy systems. Easier to just adopt this new technology and bring that new innovation to the table. But it also starts with where the consumers and businesses are as well, and where the needs are, right? It's not just innovation for the innovation's sake.
Yeah, absolutely. Like as Australia is working through uptake of real-time payments now, I mean, you say it's so used to using cards and it's so seamless and you have it in your Apple wallet already. If you don't travel, you struggle to see what is the actually big 10x value for me to change my habits. So I definitely think that will sit on those added on services that will come out of having more intel about the end consumer or businesses.
We've shown a glowing light on a lot of the work you're doing. Is there ever any frustration that creeps in? I ask that because you have 70 of the biggest and best minds as members of the EPAA who could probably use 4 or 5 whiteboards to spell out the challenges that need to be addressed and probably ways to do it. Yet it still takes time to go and solve this stuff. Is there any kind of frustration that creeps in and say, why aren't we moving quicker?
Totally, because sometimes it feels like we're talking about the same thing. And when I was at Thomson Reuters Refinitiv a long time back, I did ISO 22 migrations for corporate actions, and still I'm here doing ISO 22 migration discussions. So of course there is frustration, but I think there's so much hope and opportunity all the time in technology solving this. What's more frustrating, I find, is the geopolitical environment that we have, and some things that here maybe the naivety coming in, like how can some of the biggest markets that does so much trade together not agree on certain data flows, or how can we not make purpose codes when payments goes in and out of a country available for all participants in a standardized format. I mean, those are basics, like how can't we not get those right? And when it is politics that comes between, that makes me a little bit frustrated.
And those are the details that, again, focusing on that end user, those are the details that they don't see or know about. As a small business or as an individual, you just want your money to go from A to B. I've often used the swan analogy, and it's our job to make sure that the top of the water is this nice serene bird that's going across. Underneath, the little legs are flapping. And it's that flapping.
That's me.
That's you. That's you and the members talking about it flapping.
What I often say as an analogy, when I moved to Australia, it's a long time ago actually, but so the mobile phones were too expensive to call on, so I lived really high up, 42nd floor, and I didn't have a key card for the lift, so I had to walk in the stairs, 42 levels, go down to call my parents, down the street to a coin phone, and I would have this scratch card to scratch a code. And then I would dial a number that was to connect me to Sweden, and then I would do the 14-digit code, and it would say, okay, you have 10 minutes left on the 10 minutes on the card. That gives you 25 minutes. It will connect me to my mum, and there would be an echo on the line, and I would hang up and redo that all again. And that you can hear that was pain. You could hear how painful it was. And now I just WhatsApp, and it doesn't cost me any money at all. So that is the hope, I think. And back then, I thought it was amazing that I could even call them, because earlier on I had my grandparents in Norway and we just called them once a year because it was so expensive. So I think if we're looking at that industry, it's really an industry that I think let's try to borrow as much as possible. They did it seamless. But of course they had less challenges than the payments industry.
Love it. Where are we then? If you compare that phoning home to Sweden, and you compare kind of where we are and let's talk about maybe cross-border payments, because I think that's where, especially across or within the Asian region, that's where that fragmentation really plays a part. Where are we on the scratching off the 14 digits, the echo and line, to a free, internet-enabled call are we when it comes to payments?
I think we are on the scratching card still. There is still a long way to go. So much more could be done. But here comes the challenge, and so much time when we talk on calls like this or in round tables or even in the G20 project, we get stuck on remittance because it's so close to home and we felt the pain. It's another layer again when we start to talk about B2B, because it's different size of the corporations, it's different corridors, it's cash rich, it's time poor, it's all the different things that impact how you would like to see your perfect payment.
I'm going to steal this analogy now because I really like it, because I think I remember actually those days of having to scratch off just to make an international phone call. You think we're still on the 14-digit scratch off code, walking down 42 flights of stairs in a high-rise Australian building.
It was very fancy that I lived in the penthouse when I was a student. I have to add that one with. We did share a room, 3 of us.
So what needs to happen, even to get it down to a 3-digit scratch off? What are the steps that you and the EPAA members are talking about, that kind of, because you've got the vision of the free internet enabled phone call, but we're not going to get there tomorrow. So what are the kind of immediate kind of challenges that you and the team are working on?
So many challenges come down to missing data, or data that we can't share, or data that isn't trusted. But I mean, I could say, interoperability, harmonization, all those catchy words that we use a lot. But I would say definitions, and definitions of different kind of payments, and risk. And with risk is like what defines a risky payment, so we can start to look at how can they be done smoother, because some payments takes longer because they are riskier also. But I think definitions around what is sensitive data, because there are some of the data that are today can't travel across borders but might actually not be sensitive. And then one of my favorite words or acronyms for the last 2 years is PETS. And if we as an industry, this is something we're doing this year, is like really looking in more what is privacy enhancing technology. Because I think for the last 2 years when I used this acronym, I used to think of it like privacy enhancing technology that will solve it, because then the privacy intact. But apparently so many different flavors of privacy enhancing technology, and coming back to we need standards around it, and then we need regulations and policy how it can be used. But I do think it is something in that technology that we haven't looked close enough on. Is that something that could really enable more efficient and secure cross-border payments? I hope that it will solve some of the challenges. I had always seen as privacy enhancing technology one technology that would make the data private and give you zero proof answer to questions like, is Camilla older than 18? Yes, you don't have to know my actual age and date. But it's much more nuanced than that. We don't want to give the sensitive data away, but we want to have the proof, can I conduct this payment or not? I would love more members that are experts in privacy enhancing technology, because we as an industry need it to make that data flow, which means payments flows.
And do you think that technology exists in other industry, and it's a matter of bringing what other industries have been through into payment, or do you feel it's definitely net new build and like innovation coming in this field for us?
Oh no, perfect question, because it's coming back to what I said before. It's to have the right players in the room. So spoke to one, hopefully, member in the future, Terminal 3, I'm talking about you. And they have been very active within the government space. And I think even they've been active within the military and defense space. And when we talked about what they've done there, I really had the feeling like, come and understand our industry. Just as well as I'm saying our industry should go and understand the corporates or whoever they're dealing with. Please, you technology providers, take a step in and really see what the challenges is and the bottlenecks for that data to flow.
So the title of this podcast is Money Travels. And we always like to ask our guests if they would like to see someone in this show to talk about how money travels. Who would you like to invite in this show?
Wow, this is like a little gift to get to do the wish list. I think 2 female leaders that I really look up to and that I think it would be great to have on the show and for them to tell their stories. I would say Monica Yosuya, who's based in Delhi and knows everything about the Indian payments landscape, but also with a global lens. She's been with PayPal and MasterCard before. She's a fantastic PPP. And then I would also call out Carrie Swain, who's with Ant Group and leading their government affairs team. And that is on the call from going to market in different regulation and building that network effect. I think they've done a phenomenal work. So those would be the 2 people.
Listen, Camilla, thank you so much for joining. It's been fantastic talking to you. We've got a new kind of acronym of PPP. And I've got a great new analogy to steal of, scratching off 14 digits to call home from Australia, and how that relates to the payments industry. It's been really, really interesting.
Thank you for having me.
So that's it from Max and I this week. To keep the conversation going, you can follow us on our socials that are appearing on the bottom of your screen. And also don't forget to follow the show on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube. As always, if you've enjoyed what you heard today, leave us a review, tell your friends, or better still, do both. We'll be back next episode to explore more life-changing innovations in digital finance. So wherever your travels take you, remember to join us for the next instalment of Money Travels presented by Visa.